Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of If You Could Hide to Call podcast. My name is Clive, and today we're going to be talking about the Book of Esther. Now, the Book of Esther, I've read it before, but I've never studied it. And I'm actually very excited about today because we're getting into an incredible story. Not that don't get me wrong, I've been enjoying the Bible up to yet, but like my favorite's Genesis and sort of the beginning, and I haven't really been this excited about another book for a while now. So I'm really looking forward to Easter Esther. Um, so a couple of things before we kick off, right? So if we're reading the standard King James version, which we normally are, you'll notice something quite unusual. The name of God is not mentioned throughout the whole thing. There's times when people pray and times when people fast, but God's never mentioned. Um, it's more like it's almost set out in a way where if you read it at face value, you go, look at all these happenstances, all these coincidences that were able to come up to pass for Esther. And obviously that's not the case. We know that. We know that it's by the hand of God. So I've got here the Antiquities of the Jews, which I read from a lot. It's the complete works of Josephus. And I have the Ethiopian Bible. Now, in conjunction with these, I've come up with the story how it originally was. And look, I'm not saying that these are factual, and I will be sure to say when I'm reading from them. So either one of them, I'm just going to refer to them as the Apocrypha so that you know when I'm splitting it. And obviously we're going to read from the King James Version of the Bible, but there is extra fascinating things from the Apocrypha that we will be looking at today. So yeah, let's get straight into it. So we'll look at the Apocrypha first, because this is something that it begins with that isn't in the Book of Esther. So there's a man named Mordecai. Mordecai is going to be one of the main people, and obviously Esther, and then another man named Ahasuerus, King Ahasuerus, which that is the correct way of saying it according to the scriptures app guy that when I listen to the on the church app, that's how the reader pronounce it. Ahasuerus. So if I'm saying that wrong, I apologize, but that's the way he says it, and that's what I'm going off. Okay, so Mordecai. So Mordecai falls asleep and has this vision, this dream, right? He hears great noises, confusion, thunder, and an earthquake, causing a tumult across the earth, is how it's described. Suddenly, two massive dragons appear, roaring terribly and poised to tear each other apart in combat. At the sound of the dragons roaring, every nation on earth prepares for war to fight against the righteous nation, or the Jewish nation. And it becomes a day of total darkness, gloom, and tribulation. Now, faced with total destruction, the righteous nation cries unto God. So you know this is the Apocrypha because it's mentioning God. In response to their prayers, a tiny spring of water suddenly appears and miraculously swells into a massive overflowing river. Light breaks through, the sun rises, and the lowly are exalted to destroy the wealthy and powerful. So that's how the Apocrypha opens. So Mordecai wakes up deeply shaken, keeping the dream in mind of what we're going to go through today. He obviously keeps it in mind and spends the rest of the day trying to figure out what God is intended him to do. So that's how it opens in the Apocrypha. And you keep that in mind as we go on with the story. And then at the very end of the Apocrypha, it comes back to the dream. So really interesting. Okay, so now we'll get into the King James Bible, and that's what we're going to look at the moment. So this story opens up with Ahasuerus, King Ahasuerus. He's hosting a massive celebration in the capital city of Shushan. He puts the riches and glory of the kingdom on display for 180 days, which is a full 6 months, for his nobles, princes, and military leaders. So we're verse 8, chapter 1, verse 8 mentions that the drinking was according to the law. None did compel. Right? Let's look at that. For so the king had appointed to all the officers of the house that they should do according to every man's pleasure. So why is this important? What are we reading here? So obviously the great feast, the great party, the great gathering, the celebration that goes on for 6 months. In Persian custom, guests usually had to drink whatever the king drank. Now, Ahasuerus waives this rule, allowing every guest to drink as much or as little as they pleased. So I don't know how it's trying to show the king, whether he's like a generous king or just emphasizing the point that there's so much going on and he wants everyone to be like, this king's the best. I don't know. Because, he's going to start quite bad and he's going to end, I mean, depending on what we read from. But, no spoilers. Let's just keep going. Verse 9. And Vashti, the queen, made a feast for the women in the royal house, which belonged to King Ahasuerus. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Merriman, Biztha, Harbon, Bigtha, and Abaktha, Zethar, and Kasa, the 7 chamberlains that served in the presence of Ahasuerus the king, to bring Vashti the queen before the king with the crown royal, to show the people and the princes her beauty, for she was fair to look at. Okay, so he's, reading, especially the beginning of this, never have I thought more, I wish I had a female co-host, because this is very much, look how terrible this man is treating this woman. And I just don't feel like I'm as authoritative on the subject as, somebody that's had these experiences would be. But anyways, the queen, verse 12, the queen Vashti refused to come at the king's commandment by his chamberlains. Therefore was the king very wroth, and his anger burned in him. So, yeah, the king, he wants to show off the wife to all of his friends, which she's obviously feeling very uncomfortable with. And Vashti, Queen Vashti, just flat out refuses to come. So her defiance is absolute, and the king's reaction is immediate. He says, therefore was the king very wroth, and his anger burned in him. So then he consults his men, which one of them, called Memucan, says, Vashti the queen hath not done wrong to the king only, but also to all the priests. So not only has she embarrassed you, but all of us here. And to all the people that are in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For this deed of the queen shall come abroad unto all women, so that they shall despise their husbands in their eyes. So hey, if anybody else finds out that even the queen is standing up to the king, what all these other women, they might start standing up to their husbands, and we can't have that. So he says that you should give her royal estate to another, that is someone that is better than she is, and publish a royal decree across all 127 provinces, written in every local language, declaring that every man should bear rule over his house. So, not a great start. Obviously quite wicked and really quite unfair. Jumping into chapter 2 here, he wants to find another wife, so they suggest gathering all the beautiful virgins, young virgins, and bringing them to the palace. The young women who pleases the king the most will become the queen. And the king loves this plan, and sets it in motion immediately. So, again, this isn't going great for the king. So you'll start making up your mind about the king later, I suppose. But for now, the king is quite not a good guy. Okay, let's just put it like that. So now we're introduced to Mordecai, which we've spoken about him already from the Apocrypha, but he hasn't been introduced in the King James Version yet. So we introduce a man named Mordecai who brings to palace his cousin. It says here in verse 7, and he brought up Hadashah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, which would make him the cousin, for she had neither father nor mother, and the maid was fair and beautiful, whom Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took for her own daughter. So Mordecai is obviously quite a bit older than she is. And so that's probably why it describes more of his uncle's daughter. So that's where we're at the moment. So Mordecai comes, he brings Esther, who obviously he's adopted because her father and mother are dead. And so she's amongst all of these beautiful virgins to go and see the king. And they get taken away and they've got to do certain things, which I'm not going to get into. But in verse 11, it says, "And Mordecai walked every day before the court of the women's house to know how Esther did and what should become of her." So he's obviously keeping his eye out on Esther in a good way, just making sure that she's safe, that she's okay, and that everything that is happening, and it's all moving in motion. Verse 17, "And the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti." So now Esther has been appointed the queen. She is the one that he likes the most. And Mordecai had specifically told Esther to keep her Jewish heritage a secret. So when she was chosen, she still continued to keep that secret, which is going to be important somewhere down the line. So just keep that in mind. All right. So now Mordecai, he is sitting at the king's gate. He's basically a guard at the king's gate. And he overhears two of the king's chamberlains, Bigthan and Teresh, plotting to assassinate King Ahasuerus. So Mordecai immediately passes the information on to Queen Esther, who informs the king, giving credit to Mordecai. That's important. After it's investigated and found to be true, the two men are hung on a cross. It says a tree here, but a lot of the other interpretations say a cross, because, if you go to Jehovah's Witnesses, they say tree, which, doesn't technically mean cross, but anyway, we're not going to get into that. So they're hung up on a tree or on a cross, and Mordecai has his name written in a book called the Book of Records of the Chronicles. So keep that in mind as we go on. So now we're going to look at the Apocrypha. And the Apocrypha speaks about how when she prays, she expresses this is Esther, she expresses a deep, agonizing distaste for her pagan surroundings, the royal crown, and the king's bed, emphasizing that she only complied out of absolute necessity to survive. So Esther is quite a poor orphan. And so this is an opportunity of a lifetime, and it's really a matter of survival. That's what the Apocrypha says. Chapter 3. Now we are introduced to another man named Haman, who the king promotes above all the other princes. Let's look at verse 2 to 4. "And all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence. Then the king's servants which were in the king's gate said unto Mordecai, Why transgresseth thou the king's commandment? Now it came to pass that when they spoke daily unto him, and he hearkened not unto them." So basically they keep asking him this, why not? And he's just ignoring them. "And then," it says, "that they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's matters would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew." Okay? So eventually he says that I'm a Jew, and so that's why I don't. And so they've gone to Mordecai and say, is this okay? Okay, let me explain here. So the scripture introduces Haman as an Agite, Agagite, and Mordecai is a Benjamite. So we've read in Samuel now that Agag was the king of the Amalekites, the nation that ambushed the Israelites right after they escaped Egypt. And God commanded Israel never to forget what Amalek did, telling King Saul to wipe out all of the Amalekites. And King Saul did, except, remember, he spared King Agag, leading to Saul losing his kingdom. So this is where he comes from. So they should have all been wiped out. And the Lord said, remember what they've done to you. And so For the Jewish man, Mordecai, he refuses to bow because he remembers what the Lord has told them. So now it makes sense when he says, I'm a Jew, so that should be a good enough answer why I'm not going to bow down to this man. All right, verse 5 and 6. And when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, then was Haman full of wrath, and he thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had showed him the people of Mordecai. Wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai. So he's so angry that not only am I going to kill Mordecai, but all of the Jews. Now, verse 8. And Haman said unto the king Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of the kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all the people, neither keep they the king's laws. Therefore it is not for the king's profit to suffer them. So there's a group of people, notice he didn't actually say Jewish people. There's a group of people who refuse to keep your laws. They're doing their own laws. They've decided on their own, I'm going to do my own laws, not follow the king. So we need to, this is displeasing to the king. We need to take these people out. And Haman even offers to pay 10,000 talents of silver to the royal treasury to cover the expenses of this operation. Now, because the king completely trusts his chief minister, he takes off his ring off his finger and gives it to Haman, effectively granting him complete authority. He tells Haman to keep the money, so the 10,000 talents of silver that he offered, and do with the people as he sees fit. So the king absolutely trusts Haman. And hey, if it's benefiting the kingdom, why not? Verse 13. This is still chapter 3. And the letters were sent by post unto all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, even until the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. So, to understand what we're saying here, so there's going to be a day, we're going to choose a day where we are going to kill all of the Jews. So it's not tomorrow, it's a day. We've chosen a day. And the month Adar, which we're going to mention a few times, so remember that. Okay, it's chapter 4. Chapter 4, verse 1. Now, Esther is unaware of what's going on. So when Mordecai perceived all that was done, Mordecai rent his clothes and put on sackcloth with ashes and went out into the midst of the city and cried with a loud and bitter cry. So I think we've spoken about this before. When you put on sackcloth and ashes, you're basically showing absolute humility, showing, this, I am in sackcloth, I am in nothing. I'm not in anything royal or anything important. I am low. Like this is a man crying out for his people. And so Esther is unaware of what's going on and finds out Mordecai's outside the gates in sackcloth and ashes. So she sends Hathach to find Mordecai. Now, Mordecai obviously can't come in because he's in sackcloth and you're not allowed through the gates in sackcloth. It's disrespectful to the king. So verse 7, and Mordecai told him of all that had happened unto him, and of the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay to the king's treasury for the Jews to destroy them. So he's passing on this message to give to Esther. Also, he gave him a copy of the writings of the decree that was given at Shushan to destroy them, to show it unto Esther, and to declare it unto her, and to charge her that she should go in unto the king, to make supplication unto him, to make request before him for her people. This is up to you to go. Now, to talk to the king, it's a law punishable by death, unless the king specifically summons you. So the king has like this staff, and if the king offers the top of the staff and you touch it, that's him saying that you can come and speak to me. Anything else, you're a dead man. Esther asks Mordecai to tell all the Jews to fast for her for 3 days night and day so that she can speak to the king without being killed for it. That's in here. It does say that in the King James Bible, but it doesn't say anything about God blessings or anything like that. So the Apocrypha says that Mordecai prays during this 3 days fast. He prays, Lord, Lord, the King Almighty, thou knowest all things, and thou knowest, Lord, that it was neither in contempt nor pride that I did not bow down to the proud Haman. For I could have been content with goodwill for the salvation of Israel to kiss the soles of his feet, but I did this that I might not prefer the glory of man above the glory of God. Excellent. What a great prayer to say, I could have done this just to show, yeah, sure, I'll do whatever you want, but that's not me. I'm not going to do this for the glory of man. I'm doing this for the glory of God. So the Apocrypha then also records Esther laying aside her glorious robes, putting on mourning garments, mourning with a U, and praying intensely during the fast. And she confesses her absolute dependence on God, praying for the courage to speak the words of eloquence before the king and asking God to deliver them from their fear. So again, this isn't in the King James Version, that's in the Apocrypha, but there's no reason to believe that that didn't happen. All right, just look at chapter 5 now. After the 3 days of fasting, Esther puts on her royal robes and then goes to see the king. She can't be shown wearing mourning clothes. Now, I've got a bit here to read from Antiquities of the Jews, and if you're following along, it's Antiquities of the Jews, book 11, chapter 6. This is the Apocrypha, and it says, when Esther had used the supplication for 3 days, she put off these garments, changed her habit, and ordained herself as become a queen, and took 2 of her handmaids with her, the one of which supported her as she gently leaned upon her, and the other followed after and lifted up her large train. And thus she came to the king, having a blushing redness in her countenance, with a pleasant agreeableness in her behavior. Yet did she go into him with fear. And as soon as she was come over against him, as he was sitting on his throne in his royal apparel, which was a garment interwoven with gold and precious stones, which made him seem to be more terrible, especially when he looked at her somewhat severely, and with a countenance on fire with anger, her joints failed her immediately out of the dread she was in, and she fell down sideways in a swoon. But the king changed his mind, which happened, as I suppose, by the will of God, and was concerned for his wife, lest her fear should bring some very ill thing upon her. And he leaped from his throne, and took her in his arms, and recovered her by embracing her and speaking comfortably to her, and exhorting her to be of good cheer, and to not support anything that was said on account of her coming to him without being called. Interesting story. In the King James Version, it just simply says that she obtained favor in his sight, and the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther drew near and touched the top of the scepter. But interesting bit of background there from the Apocrypha, saying that it was God that changed the mind of the king after he saw what happened to Esther. She basically fainted. He says to her, what wilt thou, Queen Esther? What is it thy request? It shall be even given thee to the half of the kingdom. That's in, we're in chapter 5 now, if I haven't mentioned that. So, what is it that you want? I'll give you everything. I'll give you even half the kingdom. What do you request? So I like that she doesn't just say here outright, here's the problems, and I want you to fix this. She obviously has a plan, and she's obviously prayed about the plan. She says, if it seem good unto the king, let the king and Haman come this day unto a banquet that I have prepared for him. So just the king and just Haman. This is what her request is. So this is at the feast now, as they are drinking wine, the king asks her again, asking what is her true petition, and repeating his promise of up to half of the kingdom. And yet Esther delays. Instead of revealing the plot, she asks them to come to another banquet the very next day, promising that she will finally reveal the request unto them. Now Haman goes about his day, stoked because he once again has been invited to a banquet with just the king and just the queen. He thinks he's this great man. People should bow down to him. And now he's been chosen by the queen to just join him and the king. So yeah, he's loving life. Now, as he passes the gate, Mordecai refuses to stand up, bow, or even move for him. And Haman manages to control his anger, and it does say that he controls himself until he gets home, when he gathers his friends and his wife. His wife's name is Zeresh. And he talks to them and tells them what's been going on. And in verse 12, it says this, in verse 12 of chapter 5. Haman said, moreover, yea, Esther the queen did not let no man come in with the king unto the banquet that she had prepared by myself. And tomorrow am I invited unto her also with the king. So he's saying to his friends and family, this is great. She hasn't invited anyone else but me to do it. But this is funny. He says in verse 13, yes, yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Like, I'm not happy. Even though that something great has happened, I'm not happy because Mordecai just flat out refuses to bow to me or even move out of my way. Zeresh, his wife, and all of his friends come unto him and says, let a gallows be made of 50 cubits high, and tomorrow speak thou unto the king that Mordecai may be hanged thereon. Then go thou in merrily with the king unto the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, and he caused the gallows to be made. So they've gone, okay, well, you should hang Mordecai. Let's go make these gallows, then go to the king and say, there's this guy called Mordecai. He's doing this wicked thing. I've already got gallows made up. Let's go hang him. And he does. It's interesting because he makes the gallows straight away as if, yes, of course, it's going to be okay if I hang Mordecai because the king loves me and I can do whatever I want. So now let's get into chapter 6. So chapter 6, that same night, the king can't sleep, and his men read him from the book of records of the Chronicles. And while reading, they come across the part where Mordecai had uncovered the assassination plot by Bigthana and Teresh and saved the king's life. And the king asks, what honor and dignity hath been done to Mordecai for this? And the servants check, and they reply, there is nothing done for him. So you remember, the only thing that was done after this, even though Esther gave all of the praise to Mordecai, saying it was him, his name was just written in this book. So now Haman enters the court in the king's palace, probably early in the morning. The king couldn't sleep anyway. He's probably been thinking about this. And he comes to ask the king for permission to hang Mordecai on this massive 75-foot gallows that he'd built the night before. But before Haman could say anything, the king interrupts him and asks him a hypothetical question. He says here in verse 6, chapter 6, verse 6, and the king said unto him, what shall be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, to whom would the king delight to do honor more than to myself? So, of course, the king's talking about me. Who else could there possibly be? Now, Haman, obviously blinded by his ego, thinks for a minute and he says, let the royal apparel be brought which the king useth to wear, and the horse and the king rideth upon, and the crown royal which is set upon his head. And let this apparel and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, and they may array the man withal whom the king delighteth to honor, and bring him on horseback through the streets of the city, and to proclaim before him, thus shalt it be done to the man whom the king delighteth to honor. So, what's to be done? Well, whoever this is, he should be gifted with the royal apparel and the horses and march through the streets and be told that this is the man that is honored by the king, and he should be able to do anything. And so it was done. So in verse 10 it says, make haste and take the apparel and the horses, as thou hast said. So just like you said, take it all, and do so even to Mordecai the Jew that sitteth at the gate. Let nothing fail of all that thou hast spoken. So you're right. That's a great way to do it. Go take all this stuff, go to Mordecai. And It's great because you just imagine how Haman's feeling, the anger that he's feeling, but he does it because it's the king. And so they have this parade, and Mordecai's there, and he goes through and he does all that. But once the parade is over, Mordecai returns to his post at the king's gate. Like, that's where he feels like he should be. Haman, on the other hand, he rushes home, mourning. He covers his head. He tells his wife and his friends everything that happened. And his wife and the wise men say, if Mordecai be of the seed of the Jews, before whom thou hast begun to fall, so the ones that you've decided should kill, thou shalt not prevail against him, but shall surely fall before him. So while they're sitting there talking, now the king's chamberlains arrived at the door to rush Haman away to Esther's second banquet. So he doesn't really have time to process any of this. Chapter 7. So now let's jump to chapter 7. So now the king asks again for the third time. Basically, why are we here? What do you need? What is going on? And Esther says essentially that, look, my people there's a petition for my people, and if it was just sold into slavery, so be it, but it's not. My people have been said to be killed. Now the king, hearing this, he asks the question, this is verse 5, Esther, the queen, who is he? And where is he that does presume in his heart to do so? And as is verse 6, and Esther said, the adversary and enemy is the wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. So now the king's realized, well, this isn't good. And Haman, the guy that I've trusted, he's the one that's decided this. And the king can't just overturn this law. Like, it was made a law that the Jews would be killed on a specific day. It wasn't just the king's gone, yeah, go ahead, do that. They made it a law, and in Persian law, they can't just go, we're changing our mind. I'm just going to scrap that now. Like, it can't be done. So the king, he actually steps out of the room and thinks about what's going to be done. And when he steps out the room, Haman begs the Esther for help to spare his life, to essentially. And Haman stood up to make a request for his life to Esther the queen, for he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. So the king's obviously very angry, and he stepped out. Now, when the king comes back in, he makes his decision. It says, as the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Verse 9, Harbona, one of the chamberlains, said before the king, behold also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, which had spoken good for the king, standeth in the house of Haman. Perfect. So Haman's made a gallows to hang Mordecai. That would be actually the perfect spot to hang Mordecai. And it says in the end of verse 9, then the king said, hang him thereon. I mean, how ironic is that Haman, thinking he's such a great man, has gone, I'm going to construct this thing and the king is going to love it, and I'm going to kill Mordecai because I don't like him. And he is hung on the very gallows that he created. Verse 10, and they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath pacified. Yeah, it's really interesting that's how it came about. But it's not the end here. There's still a law that the Jews are going to be killed. So great, the part of Haman is gone. And, this is just a brief of the story. When you read it, like, there's so much to it. There's so much about Haman. There's so much more about Mordecai. Obviously, there's tons about Esther because, well, we'll talk about how she's remembered through the ages later. So in chapter 8, now Esther reveals her relationship to Mordecai, that, she's a Jew and she's the cousin of Mordecai. And the king gives Mordecai the ring, the same ring that he originally gave to Haman, as a symbol now that he's higher than all the princes. He's second in charge. He's like the prime minister. Whatever you say goes. And now the decree that had originally put out there to the Jewish people that were to be killed, obviously still Persian law, they need to come up with a new idea. Esther begs the king to do something. I'll read verse 5 and 6. It says, and said, if it pleases the king, and if I have found favor in the sight, and the thing seem right before the king, and I be pleased in his eyes, let it be written to reverse the letters devised by Haman, which are wrote to destroy the Jews, which are on the king's provinces. For how can I endure to see the evil that shall come unto my people, or how can I endure to see the destruction of my kindred? That's what she's asking the Lord, the king. change it. I can't see this happen. Now, the king can't, like I said, it can't just be done. So he changes, or he writes a new law. So they come together and they decide that the new law will grant the Jewish people across the entire empire the legal right to assemble and defend themselves, destroy, slay, and cause perish, just like the law to them, any armed forces that attempt to attack them on this date, which is the 13th of Adar, and then obviously seize the spoils of their attackers, which is exactly the same law against the Jews. So now it's for the Jews. Yes, what these things that we've put out there, you had the right to defend yourselves. To anyone coming to attack you, same thing to them. You can kill him, and then you can take their spoils. So now Mordecai leads the royal palace in his royal apparel, because he's now so high up. And he says the Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor. You know, now the Jewish people are more relaxed and happy about this opportunity. It's not just a slaughter. So now the day arrives. And I mean, I would think, well, Mordecai's dead. Sorry, not Mordecai. Haman's dead. Who is going, like, he's essentially the leader of this all. But people still come and attack the Jews. The kingdom of Persia, the Jews destroy many of their enemies, including 10 sons of Haman, and the Jews defeat 75,000 of their enemies who attempted to attack them. And at the end of the day, the king asks Esther if she has any further requests, and Esther asks for two things. She says that the Jews in Shushan be granted one additional day, so the 14th of Adar, to defend themselves against the remaining hostile factors in the capital, and that the bodies of Haman's 10 slain sons to be hanged upon the 75-foot gallows where Haman is. So the king grants his request. So on the 14th of Adar, the Jews in Shushan defeat another 300 men, and Haman's 10 sons are hung upon the same gallows that Haman's hung. While the Jews in the provinces rested on the 14th of Adar, the Jews in Shushan rested on the 15th. Both days become times of feasting, joy, and sending portions of food to one another. Mordecai and Queen Esther issue a formal binding decree to all Jewish people throughout all the empire, establishing an annual festival called Purim, Purim. I'll read chapter 9, verse 28, and then I'm going to go back a bit. So this is, speaking of the Adar, the days of the saving of the Jews, essentially. These days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation, every family, every province, and every city, and that these days of Purim should not fail from among the Jews, nor the memorial of them perish from their seed. Now, this celebration was defined by three key practices: gladness and fasting, celebrating the deliverance; sending portions of food to everyone; and the gifts to the poor. Now, this is celebrated today by Jewish people. They read from the Megillah, which is the Book of Esther. And it's funny because when they get to Haman's name, when they're reading from it, the people yell, and they've got these noisemakers, like I think they make like a crackling noise, and they make the noise when Haman's name is read every time to drown out his name. And it starts at sundown. This year, it's not Easter, but it's like set in a way where there's no specific date. Like it's all according to the Hebrew calendar. So this year it was March 25th to March 26th. So it started at sundown, March 25th, and it ends at nightfall, March 26th. And this, because it spans over the 2 days, the 13th of Adar and the 14th, because it was extended. And this is a celebration. This is how the Book of Esther in the King James Version ends, remembering that they should have this celebration. The celebration is still celebrated today, thousands of years later. Now, at the very end of the extended Book of Esther in the Apocrypha, after Haman has been defeated and the Jews are saved, Mordecai suddenly remembers his vision and realizes it was a literal blueprint of the events that have just been through. So here's a breakdown of it. So the two dragons, he says, the two dragons are I and Haman. So they are the two dragons that are fighting. They represent the two men locked in a deadly political and spiritual duel. Because they're two great men, great for different purposes. So just like two dragons. Now, the kingdoms that gathered at the roar of the dragons, they were the Gentile nations that riled behind Haman and to wipe out the Jews. So they all gathered together at the roar of the dragon. Like Haman is the one roaring, and they've followed and come together. They are the Gentiles to go against the Jews. Now, the river, the small spring that started, is Esther. She married the king and became queen. Esther was a small hidden spring whose courage swelled into a massive flood of deliverance that saved her people. It was Esther that saved the people. Mordecai was a helping hand. Esther was the one that got her people saved. She had the courage to come to the king, even though what she did was punishable by death. So what a great, inspiring book here. And there's so much more to it. I've got so many other things highlighted that I just have run out of time, and I didn't want to distract too much from the King James Version and jump into the Apocryphas. If you do want specifics of references, I've got them all here. Just let us know. Then thank you for joining us on another episode of If You Could Hide to Call Up podcast. Find us on Facebook, Instagram. Just look up If You Could Hide to Call Up podcast. If you type in If You Could Hide to Call Up, you'll find all the songs. If You Could Hide to Call Up podcast, you'll find us on there. Our symbol down there in the corner, if you're watching this on YouTube, it's very specific to us. There's no others out there, so you should be able to find it quite easily. And we will see you next week. Thank you.